Jade plants are not just beautiful and resilient, they actually carry a fascinating history and are symbols of prosperity and luck. Today we're diving deep into everything you need to know about how to care for these iconic succulents. This Houseplant Care 101 series is sponsored by rePotme.com. With rePotme, you can have all of your houseplant supplies delivered right to your door. They are a one-stop shop for all of your houseplant, orchid, or succulent needs. They have custom handmade houseplant soils ranging from tropical houseplants, cactus and succulents, pothos, snake plants, and more. I cannot live without their clear slotted orchid pots. They have amazing houseplant fertilizers and so much more. I've included their link in my description below, and you can get 10% off any soil with my code Ashley. Jade plants, scientifically known as Crassula ovata, are actually native to South Africa and Mozambique. Their natural habitat is in dry, rocky landscapes, which gives us an important clue about their care needs. They are part of the succulent family, storing water in their thick, fleshy leaves, which makes them incredibly drought tolerant. Jade plants, being a succulent, do enjoy a lot of light. They can get sunburn though on their leaves. So give them bright light in the morning. Set them up somewhere that's like a south facing or west facing window where they'll get a lot of bright light in the morning. And then as the afternoon happens, it'll turn into more of a bright indirect light. That would be perfect for these plants. Now, if you notice that it's getting leggy, it's growing, the stems are elongated without a lot of leaves on each stem. You see how this one's compact and really bushy. This one's been receiving enough light, but if it's getting leggy, you can prune it back and make sure you ramp up the light. And if you don't have enough light, I recommend using supplemental lighting, grow lights. There's a lot of great options out there that you can kind of put in your home, and people would never know it's a grow light, but your plants will love it. Another way to tell if your jade plant is getting enough light is if it has some of the purplish color on the leaves. As you can see here, this one has quite a bit of purple, but you might just see it on some of the plants around the outside of the leaves, and that's a good indicator that it's receiving enough light. One of the most common mistakes with jade plants is overwatering. Now, jade plants, like most succulents, have very thick, beautiful leaves, and they store a lot of water in their leaves, which makes them very drought tolerant. So we want to make sure that the plant dries out before we give it another drink. Now, overwatering doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving your plant too much water. It means that the soil is retaining way too much moisture and it's not drying out fast enough, leaving those roots just sitting in saturated soil, and that can cause root rot, which is the fastest way to kill a plant in my experience. Now, if you're unsure if your plant is thirsty, the first thing to do is check if the soil is dry. If the soil is dry, go ahead and give it a drink. And not just like a little drink, give it a good drink, like saturate that soil. Give it a good watering from the top. You can leave it sitting in water if you want to bottom water it and let the soil absorb the moisture up through the bottom of the drainage holes. That's a great option for watering succulents. However, another way to test is if the leaves are a little bit puckered up, if they're thin, if they can bend. Like right now, this plant is very hydrated, so if I were to bend these succulent-y leaves, it would snap in half. However, if it was dehydrated, it was really thirsty, then it would be thin enough or wrinkled and pruny, and I could kind of bend the leaves. Moisture meters can also help to tell if there's moisture in the soil. As long as you have a really good, well-draining soil mixture, which I'll go into in a minute, then you won't have to worry about if you're overwatering your plant. Just make sure that there's enough moisture in the soil to enable that plant to get a good drink. During the winter months, however, a lot of times these succulents will go dormant, so I limit watering at that point to about once a month, maybe a couple times a month, depending on your plant and depending on the soil. For reference, this is what a moisture meter looks like. You can order them online, and they're inexpensive and great help for watering. So now I'm going to repot this plant. A lot of people get jade plants handed down through their generations, and so you want to make sure you take really good care of that plant. A lot of times people will receive it as gifts because it's a sign of luck and prosperity or a symbol of those things. So it's very helpful to know how to repot. So the first thing to make note of is that you don't need to repot jade plants all that often. I mean, every 3 years is fair, depending on how the plant is doing. Now, if you see roots coming out the bottom of the pot, coming out the top of the pot, the soil has become hydrophobic, as in it's not retaining any moisture at all anymore. You water it and it just isn't retaining moisture, absorbing the moisture, then that's a good time to repot. If you're not noticing any new growth on your plants and it has enough light, it has kind of all the things are fine, and you're wondering what's going on, it might need to be repotted. So The reason why I'm repotting this plant is because a lot of times the soil from the nursery or from the big box shops isn't perfect for the plant, and you do have to be somewhat careful about overwatering or the soil retaining too much moisture. So what I like to do as often as possible is once the plant has acclimated to my home and I know that it's, you know, settled in from the greenhouse, I like to repot the plant with the ideal soil, and then I don't have to worry about it for the next 3 years every time I water it if it's going to be overwatered, checking the soil. It just makes life a lot easier. And so what you want to do is get a pot that's about 1 to 2 inches bigger than the root ball. So I'm going to loosen up the soil a little bit, try to get some of this excess soil. So this is actually pretty dry soil. When you do decide to repot, I'd say water your plant a couple days before so that the roots are nice and hydrated. If the roots are dry and brittle, they're a lot easier to break, and that plant's going to focus on repairing those roots rather than, you know, putting out that beautiful new growth. So you want to get rid of any excess soil. This one is very compact. So I'm gonna get a little chopstick and loosen up the soil a little bit without disturbing the root system too much. Actually, I'm gonna use this moisture meter because it's going to easily do the same job. Now, as you're repotting, if you have some of the leaves that drop off, don't worry about it because we're gonna propagate these and make a bunch of other little jade plants. So you can use this to just loosen up the soil a little bit. Like I said, this soil is really dry, so it's making it a little bit more challenging, but if you've watered your plant a couple days before, you won't have that problem, and any excess soil should come out pretty quickly. I don't know what kind of soil this is, but it feels, I don't know if there's moss in there or what, but it's not like normally you would have some version of like a cactus and succulent soil mixture. So it's probably a good idea that I'm repotting this plant. So let's choose a pot. Now again, you want it to be 1 to 2 inches bigger than the root ball. Here's the original pot. And you don't always want to go 1 to 2 inches bigger than the original pot, because if it's not root bound, sometimes the pot that you buy the plant in is actually too big for it. So you want to go 1 to 2 inches bigger than the root ball itself. Although this one seems to have a good amount of roots. So yeah, that's way too small. We're gonna go a little bit bigger than that. Now I like to use these nursery pots. As many of you know, I partner with rePotme. They have amazing houseplant supplies. I'm really, really proud to work with them and recommend them because I love their products. However, you can get nursery pots from a lot of different places. I recommend any type of pot that you use that has a lot of drainage holes, as you can see here. I like to use nursery pots because I can change out cover pots without having to repot my plant every time, especially these types of plants. You don't want to repot them that often. And I like to use clear nursery pots because I can keep an eye on the moisture and keep an eye on the roots and just keep an eye on how it's going over the next however many years. And terracotta is also a great option. Terracotta pots, clay pots, they will wick away moisture from the plant, so you don't have to worry about overwatering as often because it'll just wick away that moisture. However, I don't want to have to water my plants super regularly. I don't mind if it retains a little bit of moisture in the soil, especially knowing that I'm using a good soil mixture. I am okay with a plastic pot that might retain a little bit more moisture, so I don't have to water my plant every couple of days, especially for tropical plants. These succulents, you won't have to water it all that often. Yeah, this is a very strange soil mixture. Interesting. I mean, the plant's healthy, it's doing well. It's always fun to get your hands in the soil, right? Now you can always make your own soil blend. You can use 25% potting mix, 75% either perlite, pumice, sand for a cactus and succulent blend. I'm gonna be using the Jade Plant Imperial Succulent Mix from rePotme. They have all different customized soil blends. And when I saw that they had the Jade Plant soil, I was really excited to use it and share it with everybody. It has everything in there. Now, every soil that I use from them is totally different. So I'm gonna show you what this soil looks like so that you can have you can know kind of what you want your soil to look like if you are making your own. Whoop, there we go. Now this one has like leca, it has little rocks in it, perlite, pumice. It has all sorts of good stuff in there. And as you can see, it would be a good well draining soil mixture while still maintaining moisture. I've learned a lot about cacti and succulents over the years. Trial and error. A lot of error. So yeah, this is cool that it has the little like leca balls in there to help with aeration and drainage. This is very, very nice soil. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, that's really, really nice soil. Absolutely perfect. The plant is gonna love this. Now, because the soil's dry and it was very compacted, I haven't moved the root system around too much. I did a little bit of the aeration with my moisture meter there, but the roots will naturally navigate through to find the new soil. So you just go by your own judgment on the plant and what you think is best if you need to remove more or less soil. But through the years of trial and error, I've learned that soil is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing when it comes to keeping your houseplants healthy and thriving. You'd think it's watering, lighting. Really, all of that is relative to what kind of soil you have, especially watering. The easiest way to kill our plant is with overwatering and root rot. And the best way to prevent overwatering isn't by withholding water, it's by making sure that your soil is well draining enough. And once that light bulb went off in my head, I never, knock on wood, I hardly ever get root rot anymore on my plants. I mean, it's really, really rare, where before I was getting root rot all the time on my plants. And I was stressing about, is it too much water, like withholding water? My plants were struggling. But now that I know that I just need to have the right soil, well draining enough for these tropical plants, then it's great. Or the cacti and succulents, you know. Yeah, this looks really good. This is the right pot size. I love these nursery pots. So yeah, whether you make your own or use a cactus and succulent mix. If you use a cactus mix, I would add maybe a little bit more potting mixture to it so that it would retain at least some moisture, depending on what kind of cactus mix you get. But everything that I'm using will be linked below, including this potting mat, which I love this potting mat. I have like a cloth one too, but I still find that soil gets everywhere. Where on this one, it really does do a good job of preventing things from getting everywhere. Okay, and we haven't had a ton of leaf droppage, just a couple here. Oh, here's another one. Again, save these. All right, so that looks great. So the next step would be give it a good watering. Get your watering can, water it from the top, just water till you see that it's absorbing that moisture, till it's draining out the bottom. And what you want in a well-draining soil mixture is as you're watering it through the top, the water's just draining out the bottom. And then you just make sure that your soil has some good, nice some good water retention to it, and then you're fine until the next time that it's dry. So some of these leaves dropped off as I was repotting, so what we're gonna do is propagate these. It's very simple with a jade plant. And I'm gonna use this little nursery pot, which is perfect for it, while I have everything already set up. So you can see this one has already started propagating itself. It has like a little pup right here. So what will happen is this goes in the soil, it'll start to grow new plants, and then the big leaf will eventually like shrivel up and kind of just shrivel up and turn brown, but it'll have put off a bunch of new pups. So you can leave these out to cure for a few days, harden off, but I'm gonna go ahead and set this up while I'm here thinking about it. And then all you do is just set it into the soil, maybe push the end in just a tiny bit into the soil. You can also cut it back a little bit if you want to. It's not 100% necessary though. And then you just put it into the soil like so. So something like, oops, something like this. And then you can take, I'm gonna water the top of it, or you You can water the top of it, spritz the top of it, and just keep it in a nice sunny place. Make sure that it doesn't dry out too much. Just make sure you stay on top of keeping it hydrated, especially for propagations. You want to make sure they're more on the hydrated side. And before you know it, you'll have little pups growing. And this is a great option as well if you're pruning your jade plant, because jade plants, a lot of times once they're in our homes, they can become leggy, like I said, when they're not getting enough light. And just in general, they can grow tall, and you just want to trim them back if you want to keep it bushy, because it helps promote offshoots and the plant to maintain that bushiness. And when you do that, just take whatever you cut off, propagate it, and then once it's propagated, you can put it back in the pot, or you can just take these leaves and put it back in the pot directly, and it'll help encourage the bushiness and have a fuller plant. Jade plants can thrive in your normal household temperature and humidity, so they are fine with like between 60 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. They can go down to probably even 50 degrees, but as I always say, if you're comfortable, your plants are comfortable. If you're uncomfortable, cold, then your plants are going to be cold. So if you have them near a window and it's really cold outside in the wintertime, just pull them back. And they actually enjoy a dry environment. So normally with a lot of these plants that we bring into our homes, they appreciate high humidity. With jade plants, they don't need that, which is one of the reasons why they're such easy, great plants to have. So they can actually get fungal problems if they are in very, very high humidity conditions. So if you're worrying that you're not having enough humidity for your jade plant, you don't have to worry about that. They're absolutely fine. As always, it's important to fertilize our plants, but there are some important things to know about jade plants. Now, they're light feeders. A lot of these tropical plants that we have that have like a lot of foliage. I mean, this one looks like it has a lot of leaves, a lot of foliage. A lot of the ones that we normally have need a lot of feeding, especially in the growing months during the spring and the summer. Jade plants, not so much. You don't have to worry too much about it. However, I would recommend fertilizing it a couple of times during the growing months. Use a cactus and succulent food and fertilize at half strength, especially in the beginning, to make sure that your plant does okay with it. Get a water-soluble fertilizer, put it in the watering can, again at half strength. Just read the instructions on the back very carefully. I learned that the hard way, where I was over-fertilizing my plants and I couldn't figure out what was going on. The leaves were turning yellow, they were seemingly burnt, and it was because I was putting way too much fertilizer. I misread the instructions. So common sense, right? But you know, we all have our lessons the hard way. So fertilize at half strength. And then if your plant seems to be doing really well with that, you could maybe fertilize a couple of times during the growing months at full strength. Don't fertilize at all during the winter months or in the fall and in the super early spring. And then once it starts to warm up, we're getting more into the growing months, then you can get back into fertilizing, because these plants, they do tend to go dormant during the winter time. So again, another plant that's really easy. You don't have to worry about fertilizing it every time you water it, anything like that. So the only other thing I would say, because I think we've pretty much covered all of the things that you need to know at this point of how to like really take care of your jade plants. The only thing I would say is that they're just as susceptible to pests as a lot of other houseplants are. However, there are very simple solutions. One of the things that I always use is systemic granules on my plants, and the systemic granules will go into the soil. The plant absorbs the active ingredient in the systemic granules, and then any pests that get on the plant will eat the active ingredient and it kills them off. It does a great job. And I use that in pairing with insecticidal soap. So I know a lot of my succulents and cacti seem to attract mealy bugs or end up with mealy bugs, which are like the little white fuzzy ones that you see, or scale. And insecticidal soap will eradicate that. So this is insecticidal soap. It doesn't need to be any specific brand, whatever is easy to find. I have some linked below. But just use an insecticidal soap, spray it on the leaves. It should get rid of any pests that you see. Now with cacti and succulents, they can be a little bit more sensitive to insecticidal soap. So maybe test out a couple of leaves first, see how your plant reacts to it. If it does okay with it, you can spray it all over. Some people will use like rubbing alcohol with a Q-tip to get rid of mealy bugs. I have had a lot of experience with this, even with my cacti and succulents. Just, you know, test a couple leaves first to make sure. And then as with all plants, I recommend when you bring them home, wash them off with water. Once a month, take them into the tub or take them outside and spray the leaves off. And yeah, I mean, that'll just get rid of any pests or eggs or whatever that the insecticidal soap and the systemic granules don't get a hold of. If you have fungus gnats, those like pesky little flies flying around, you can use mosquito bits in the soil or make a mosquito bits tea. I've done a video on that. And just water it with that mosquito bits tea. Use a couple tablespoons of mosquito bits, let it sit in warm to hot water, and it kind of soaks, makes a tea, and then use that to water your plants. Or I think now they even have drops that have that active bacteria or whatever it is that's the active ingredient in the mosquito bits, and you can just take the drops, put it in water, which is a lot easier than making the tea. I don't really know. I've been trying to find those drops, but yeah, you just water it and it'll get rid of those fungus gnats. You just have to treat it recurringly though, because there's a whole life cycle with fungus gnats, and you have to like kill off all the larvae and the eggs. So after a few weeks of watering with either mosquito bits tea or those drops, it will get rid of those pesky fungus gnats. Using that in like coupling up with the little yellow sticky traps, which will attract the adult fungus gnats and like get rid of those, is a winning combination. So yeah, it's just every time I do a care video, I like to mention some helpful pest prevention tips or pest management, because it's something that all of us deal with, and I've learned over time like not to be alarmed and that it's all manageable, especially with some of the great products that we can find on the market. So yeah, feel free to leave any questions below. If you have questions about taking care of jade plants, I'll do my best to answer. We also have a very knowledgeable plant community, so feel free to leave any of your tips and tricks. Jade plants are hugely popular, so I'm sure there's lots of helpful tips and tricks out there. Yeah, and subscribe if you like care videos or plant videos. I post at least once a week, always good planty vibes, and we have a wonderful community on TikTok and Instagram. All right, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I get to see you soon. Bye.